America's landscape is dotted with hidden and haunting reminders of its past. Sites rarely spoken of, yet full of stories of disease, violence, and neglect. These are the forgotten mass graves of America. Long before the United States became a nation, epidemics shaped its populations. Smallpox, cholera, yellow fever, diseases that swept through towns and cities, claimed thousands. In the 18th and 19th centuries, victims were often buried quickly and without ceremony in communal graves, sometimes just on the outskirts of settlements. In New Orleans, for example, cholera outbreaks in the 1830s led to mass graves along the Mississippi River, as overwhelmed city officials scrambled to contain the dead. Many of these sites were later paved over, built upon, or simply forgotten, leaving only faint depressions in the ground to mark where the victims rested. But disease wasn't the only force creating these graves. Violence, both on the battlefield and off, left its mark. Native Americans, European settlers, and later soldiers of the Civil War, all left behind anonymous graves. Some sites, like the mass graves of the Trail of Tears, tell a story of forced displacement and suffering. Thousands of Native Americans died from starvation, exposure, and disease as they were forced westward in the 1830s, often buried hastily in unmarked plots. These graves were a tragic testament to the systemic neglect and brutality of the era. In the industrial age, the pattern repeated. Urban centers became home to mass graves as epidemics, poor sanitation, and overcrowded workhouses claimed the lives of the poor and marginalized. In cities like Philadelphia and Chicago, paupers, orphans, and those deemed socially undesirable were often interred in unmarked plots in what were called potter's fields, graves that were dug quickly, filled with dozens of bodies, and largely forgotten. The Civil War brought its own horrors. Thousands of soldiers died far from home, and proper burials were often impossible. Battlefield mass graves stretched for miles, sometimes identified only later by monuments or plaques. The urgency of war and the limitations of record-keeping meant that many soldiers' final resting places remain unknown. Yet these graves were not limited to the past. Into the 20th century, mass burials occurred during outbreaks like the 1918 Spanish flu, which killed tens of thousands in a matter of weeks. Poor communities, unable to cope with the scale of death, often buried victims in unmarked plots, leaving a legacy of sorrow and erasure. The reasons these graves were forgotten are complex: social stigma, racial and economic inequalities, and simple neglect often meant that entire groups of people were erased from official records. African Americans, Native Americans, immigrants, and the poor were disproportionately represented in these graves, their deaths treated as less significant than those of the privileged. Today, historians, archaeologists, and activists are working to rediscover these lost sites, to honor the forgotten dead, and to tell their stories. Some mass graves have been uncovered during construction projects, while others are preserved as historical sites or memorials. Yet many still lie beneath city streets, parks, and farmland, their histories only partially remembered. The forgotten mass graves of America are more than a record of death. They are a reflection of society's failures, its inequalities, and its moments of crisis. They remind us that behind every historical statistic, there were lives, families, and communities, buried, often anonymously, beneath the surface of a nation that sometimes chose to look the other way. By remembering these graves, by acknowledging the stories of those lost to disease, violence, and neglect, we confront a part of American history that is uncomfortable, but essential. It is a history of suffering, resilience, and, ultimately, the ongoing work of memory and recognition.